Hello, and welcome to this session about trends and challenges with industrial IoT. My name is Chantel Polsonetti. I'm a vice president with ARC Advisory Group, where my coverage area includes industrial IoT edge, hardware, and software. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for this session, where our panelists include Travis Cox, Chief Technology Evangelist for Inductive Automation, the Ignition software people. Welcome, Travis. Christy Valet, Head of Product Edge at SLB, a global technology company that's innovating oil and gas and digitizing, decarbonizing, and developing new energy. And finally, hello, Christy. And finally, Sandeep Pandya, CEO of Everguard, a company building an industrial safety solution with advanced machine learning and computer vision technologies. Welcome, Sandeep. Okay, so audience, we have some prepared questions for the panelists, but I'd really like to encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A panel that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. We'll be monitoring the Q&A throughout the course of our discussion, which should last about 40 minutes. So please let us hear from you and what you'd like to find out about trends and challenges of industrial IoT. So Christy, I'm going to pick you to kick off our conversation today. And what I'd like to do is sort of pursue somewhat of a top-down, talk about the generic drivers and challenges, and then speak a little more specifically about certain aspects of the edge that we find is important. So Christy, what do you see as the primary drivers behind customer adoption of industrial IoT and the associated edge native architectures?
No, so first off, I just want to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And I just want to take this opportunity as well to thank the data for allowing me to sit on this panel. So, right, so Chantel, your question is, what do we see on the
primary drivers yeah.
adoption and evolving drivers, right? Mm-hmm. So first off, if you were to take a look at the different technologies we just talked about, IoT, edge, and cloud, they're three distinct technologies, right? And in certain scenarios, each one of them probably have a different driver, correct? But if we were to take a look at this overarching, I would divide the question once again to drivers, adoptions, and evolving drivers. So the drivers is very straightforward, vanilla answer. A lot of our customers are looking for efficiency, cost reduction, data-driven decisions, and remote operations, right? How I see this is no different to how we behave as consumers, right? Us as consumers and our customers behave very, very similarly in the sense that all of us have an edge, cloud, and IoT device that we probably have on our desk or in our pockets right now, our smartphones, right? So how would I draw that parallel? Thinking about the motivating factors that moved me from my flip phone or my landline to my mobile phone, right? When you think about efficiency, right? I'm now untethered from my desk and I have all the apps I need to be productive anywhere, anytime. The second part is when you think about cost reduction. Everyone's like, oh my goodness, these iPhones, these Android devices cost so much. But I just want to remind people back in the time when we used to leave the house, or even on a vacation, we would have a phone, we'd have an iPod, iTunes in our pocket, as well as a camera, right? So you would have three devices. We now have all that on a single device. Now, when it comes to data-driven decisions, aside from, I'll admit, trying to cheat during pub quizzes, we now have, when we put our Google Drive or Wave into, I'm very directionally challenged, so I really depend on Google Drive, it gives me the best possible route. Places where I can avoid traffic, the way I can get to where I'm going the fastest. And probably the last one in terms of remote operations, now this really gets into like the IoT, edge, cloud type of discussion is where I can now communicate to my other edge IoT devices from my house, right? If I know no one's home, start the vacuum. If I want to talk to my dog while I'm at work, set up my buddy so I can give him or her a treat, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where I would put the drivers, efficiency, cost reduction, data-driven decision, and remote operations. And then now when we think about how adoption impacts this shifts slightly, right? So just hang with me here in terms of why I decided to separate the two, right? So when it comes to our customers will be probably influenced by different factors, right? Like environment, perceived value of the technology, social influence, correct? And as well as the situation. You know, we have these live operations, it's called live operations in SLB, where we don't necessarily need to send a full crew to the well site. We can actually reduce the number of crews. You know, there's the manual part of the operations. We send that crew. However, the crew who can operate the operations from the office, we don't need to send them there, right? And then when I talk about environment, perceived value, social influence, and situation, you know, at first it was a little bit of, okay, what is the value proposition of reducing the crews at the well site, right? At that time, our customers had one thought. Now think about it, let's fast forward, or even rewind time, I guess. Think about COVID. When COVID hit, right, that changed our situation, that changed our environment, that changed a lot of scenarios. So now all of a sudden our live remote operations became a real situation that was tangible and made sense to everyone. So that's how adoption can come in and play. And then the last point in terms of evolving drivers or the push for remote access, mobile abilities, et cetera, I think this also, we also have to talk about evolving priorities, right? I think when it comes to drivers, you can probably pick a top 10 list that almost every organization,
Sure.
every company will talk about.
Sure.
But then in terms of the different niches, it'll come in as different priorities for everyone, right? But then this is where it's fun, right? Where you get, and this is why I wake up with a smile on my face every morning. I really enjoy what I'm doing. You have to think about the two parts of the equation where we have this perpetual machine of a symbiotic relationship between technology advancement and human wants, right? The influence of the two that they have on one another between the continuous development of technology and the evolving wants that we have as individuals, you know, it can really be boiled down to if technology progresses, it addresses and fulfills what we need as humans. At the same time, we have additional wants, which actually further drives technology innovations, right? So that relationship drives innovation, creates a cycle of growth and product development, enhances our lives. You know, I like to run my Ring camera for my phone and fosters economic growth, right?
Thank
so that's
you.
how I would kind of put those three together.
And I appreciate, you know, you're making different references and parallels to our experience as consumers and humans. And I want to ask both Travis and Sandeep their opinion, but I also want to, you know, there's the drivers that, let's say, you know, 10 years ago when the industrial internet became a thing, let's say, you know, when GE wrote that famous paper about the industrial internet. And then there's, you know, like you mentioned, Christy, about the pandemic influence. In our business, it's particularly been true around remote access. But then recently, like our most recent forum as a company that we just had in February, there was a real emphasis on sustainability. So I just wanted to put those out as sort of how we've seen the drivers evolve. And Travis and then Sandeep, do you want to speak to your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of dovetail off a lot of what Christy said. I mean, you know, data is kind of king today, right? And the technologies that are out there that are available have advanced so much that there's a lot more that's available that we can get into. And you know, the business needs have evolved and changed over time. And of course, that means that we need to get more data. We need to get access to more of that data, do more with that data, so that we could be more streamlined, more efficient, and we could focus on some of the bigger efforts, right? And some of the things that we've been focusing on historically. And I think that's really been driving this, you know, a lot. Manufacturers are really, a lot of companies are really focused in on, okay, well, what can this data really do for us now? And there's more people that need it, right? At different levels, not just operational folks. Now it's, you know, it's executive, it's how we can make decisions as an organization that are more, you know, that are more, you know, that are focused on more on how we can be more efficient.
Sounds good. Sandeep, do you have any thoughts on the matter?
No, I think Christy and Travis really covered a lot of it, but all I'll say is that, kind of at a macro level, probably over the last, 20 or 30 years, we've seen, since coming at this from kind of an industrial perspective, kind of manufacturing going overseas, a lot of the operations in this country maybe were perceived to be less efficient than maybe low cost centers, et cetera. But what's been interesting and exciting is to actually see kind of the reshoring of manufacturing coming back. And that's kind of a hard boot or a reset opportunity for industrials, in, let's say, the US, to not only bring back manufacturing, but to look at ways to do it more efficiently, right? So it's kind of like, hey, give us a second chance. And that's where technology really comes in, right? That's where enterprise class software and connectivity and data analytics now allow that industrial facility in Ohio that, was vacant or taken over by someone else now to be kind of reinvigorated, because these technologies now allow that facility to run so much more efficiently than it did 30 or 40 years ago, and even more efficiently possibly than the low cost center. And that's what's exciting. And then of course there are, strategic, I think COVID taught everybody about supply chain continuity and resilience and securing from a national security perspective, key supply chains, like semiconductors and other things. But so really it's a confluence of security, reliability, continuity, but without yielding on efficiency, and candidly without industrial IoT or IoT, the connectivity of within the fabric of the facility and the operation. You really can't get all of those other things to work without it. So I think there's kind of a macro level digitization, reshoring effort that is now being realized at the grassroots level through these enabling technologies. I think later in this talk, we'll talk about all the challenges that are still there in trying to get this stuff in there. But that we can talk about that a little bit more later.
So I just want to check with you, Sandeep. Am I projecting on your words? I'm making a connection in my head between what you're saying about reshoring and that being an opportunity for like new technology to be introduced into the process. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There's a slipstream that is happening for macro reasons and global geopolitical reasons that I think is an opportunity for any technologist, any enterprise, even the industrials, to kind of reinvent themselves. And it's not a major overhaul. It's surgery. It's not going to the butcher. So and I absolutely agree. I think there is that opportunity right now. Now is the moment for that.
Can I borrow that saying? Surgery not going to the butcher?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so Travis, I'd like to ask you a question that will sort of extend what we've been talking about right here. But like Sandeep was talking about, how do you see IoT changing the way that businesses operate?
Yeah, no, I see IoT really changing the way businesses operate, and I think in a pretty significant way. As I said before, right, there's a huge focus on the data and being able to democratize that data. For so long, we look at the industrial world, there's been siloed data, siloed applications, or things that are very focused on its particular use case, does integrate with other pieces, and or plants operating independently of one another, right? There's not a kind of a global enterprise focus on what they're trying to do. And I think that's been a huge shift that's happened here, right? Those kind of days are over. Organizations are thinking more about distributed architectures and leveraging edge technologies, leveraging open standards, being able to get data into more places. And when doing that, thinking about how they're going to standardize on that data, how do they model that data, add context to it, make sure that data is understandable across the organization, right? So it's bringing that kind of focus and that awareness into play, which hasn't really been done because it's been, I'm only going to do it in my SCADA system. That's the only place I'm going to have it. I don't need it anywhere else. Well, that's not true, right? Data is valuable across the entire organization, and I think there's that need to want to get access to it, but to think about it in a more scalable way, right? We can't just do it at one location and get success. We have to do it across our entire organization, right? So that we can really get value and insight out of that data. And I think companies are are focusing a lot on their digital transformation journeys from the top down, right at the enterprise level. And that's a shift for a lot of companies, and that's a big culture change. I think culture change is probably one of the big things that is happening with industrial IoT, right? Is they have to think about, how do we adjust our people and our processes to be able to do this? And that means bringing OT and IT together, right? That's the infamous gap that's been there, and bridging those two and getting the people from the OT, from the operations side and the IT side, working together and leveraging the best-in-class tools on both ends and understanding what the business objectives are. That if you could do it, there's a lot of value, but it's a hard journey, right? That culture change, we've seen that being a difficult thing for a lot of companies, a lot of customers to get right.
Can you hold that thought? Because we're going to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And
go ahead.
The last thing to mention is just that, like, there's this willingness now. I think that one of the big things that's happening is there's a willingness to look at, I think, as Sandeep said, right, the technology has evolved, and there's all these pieces that are mature, right, and secure and ready. That there's now a willingness to leverage those technologies and leverage the cloud, where that was, we wouldn't even think about cloud for 7 years ago, 8 years ago. We didn't think about it at all, right? And now there's pretty much everybody has some strategy around leveraging cloud and going into leveraging analytics and AI, which I know we'll get into more detail here. So there's just a lot of value. And I want to come back to one thing you said. I think it's really changed, IoT's really changed businesses and the pandemic, is that remote work, right? Because these technologies are so good, it allows for people to be able to create huge value and being at home at the same time doing that. Right? If we get that data available, these data scientists can be at home and working with it, going further, and being able to connect in and stay connected to the operation, do that remote troubleshooting, whatever it is. It's available today because of the technology. So I think companies are really adapting to this, and it may be easy or hard, but there's they understand the need and the want to do that.
I want to leverage one of the things that you said and tie it together with what Nathan from Emerson said when he was on before us about distributed architectures. Like he had a 4-phase, over the course of his career. These are the major shifts he'd seen, and the last one was distributed field for the process customer. And you were talking about distributed data. And I heard Christy talking about it too, in terms of people out in the field. And one of the things I just wanted to point out that we talk about our customers with is that there's distribution, but it's a means to an end. It's not an end to itself. It's like, well, what are you doing, with that distributed data? So while we're sort of consolidating our position on the drivers, why don't we talk a little bit about the challenges? So to be honest, Travis, I totally agree with you, if I heard you correctly, about your point that, and Sandeep too, that a lot of this stuff is already there. It's not like it takes a real quantum leap of faith, or understanding for the customer to adopt. But what kinds of challenges, Travis, you started with the IT/OT issue. Is that a major one in your mind?
Yeah, I think there's two major ones in my mind. OT, IT, and having them come together, and the challenges that have been there, definitely is one. I think the other, though, is kind of, I'm not gonna say lack of vision, but not having a clear use case and what they're trying to, like, what the company's trying to solve, right? Like you're talking about, the edge can be a means to an end. We don't just do it to do it, right? There has to be a reason for introducing these technologies. And we also can't eat the entire elephant at once, right? We have to be able to do this in small pieces and get wins. If we're not delivering value and getting ROI as we're putting in these new technologies, then we're doing it wrong, right? And it's like you said, we're not replacing everything. We're augmenting, we're adding, we're being able to adapt our infrastructure. Our architecture will change drastically over the next 5 years by doing this, right? It'll look way different down the road, but we're doing it because there's a real business objective or a real need to do that. Whether it's, I want to predict a machine failure, whether it's just, I want to forecast the process, whether it's just, I want to get data to certain stakeholders, there's got to be some clear vision. And that vision has to be from the top down, right? The executives have to kind of lead that vision and say, here, as organizations, this is where we want to go. And that, so that everybody down below is kind of marching against that same order. And that's that's kind of how you see OT and IT come together, right? Is because there's that clear vision from above and saying, hey, look, we need the culture change. We need these teams to work together. It's not siloed anymore. And I think, those challenges are very prevalent. I think the technology is actually kind of easy. It's the people and the culture and these that I think are hard.
Yeah, and I agree with you that the C-suite attention definitely helps. Christy, do you have any comments from your perspective as to the challenges for implementing industrial IoT?
From the challenges always spawn opportunities, right? And I was just thinking about when Travis was talking, but yeah, before we were very isolated, not even as in data as an organization, period, right? Coming from a tech organization, we always believe that we build a lot of things, like everything from a downhole tool. I promise you, the organization has either engineered or they had a part of, like, we even manufactured our own O-rings. That's how deep into the engineering and the technology and the designing we're into, right? But now we've evolved and moved forward. I think this openness and this partnering mind frame has really kind of accelerated and helps us jump over these hurdles of these challenges, right? When you take a look at a whole problem, potentially you need, this person or this partner to do this type of the solution or this, and this is where you kind of get the elements of the Lego blocks where you can either put it all together to build a complete vision, a complete solution quickly, right? And I think this is where, some of the challenges that Travis talked about, having OT, IT challenges, the use cases, really scoping the problem, absolutely. But now there's more enablers and tools that we didn't think about probably 20 years ago that helps us jump these hurdles.
There you go. Okay, Sandeep, do you have any thoughts on the matter?
No, again, I think, my colleagues here really covered all of the bases. But, what I've seen, in deploying now deep technology based, kind of industrial IoT solutions for the last 8 or 9 years in various industrial verticals, from commercial trucking to the metals and manufacturing space, mining and construction, just to name a couple, and dabbling a little bit on the oil and gas side. I think Travis kind of hit it on the head where you talk about, what is the use case? What's the relevancy? A lot of technologists, and I'm guilty of this, we like to start with technology first and figure out what we can do with it. And that's wrong. Don't do that.
Right.
The other side of that is, okay, well, you can start with a use case in mind, but these organizations are vast. The large metals conglomerate or the manufacturing conglomerate or the mining conglomerate. You have the whole issue of, indoor and outdoor. Just like, for instance, you can have a great system that works within the four walls of a 10 million square foot factory, but as soon as you go to the scrap yard or the coil yard that's just outside, you have no coverage. And it's not because of the AI or the enterprise software. You just don't have power and comms. It's like, how do I power my sensors? How do I get the data off there? And all the things I'm trying to solve inside, I need to solve outside. Same thing with construction. What makes it very challenging is it's not only outdoors for the large part, it's moving. It's there's a 3-week look ahead schedule and the entire site changes week to week. So whatever tech you deployed in week 1, it better move and wobble and go all over the place following, workers and processes in weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and onward. And so I think these are the things that aren't apparent when you're thinking about the gee whiz part of tech and, we'll produce all this great data. The last thing I'll say here, so that we can come back to it if we need to, is there's a lot of things that you can do that even initially might appeal to the C-suite of an industrial or the other management chain. But when you get to the boots on the ground level, people are like, okay, that's great, but what do I do with that? Or that's good for a little while, like wearables. I've seen this because we've deployed them. They use them for 6, 8, 10 weeks, get a good sense of what their workers are doing. A little bit like we're all guilty of it. We bought the Fitbit or the Apple Watch, and then after a couple of months, we kind of got bored with charging it, and we kind of know what it's telling us. And so apathy, and business models are not built on apathy. So it's just another thing to think about is how do you make this thing relevant for the long term? and not get ripped out or displaced.
That's an excellent point. I could definitely see that, sort of the hype cycle and then, it's in the closet, right?
Exactly. Corporate goes home, nobody cares anymore,
Right.
and they're back to doing things the way they did for 20 years. Yeah.
Well, let's take a tangent off of that comment then, and let me come back to you. Your solution is machine learning and AI based, right? So AI is certainly one of the the new things impacting the edge. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how you see AI impacting edge architectures going forward?
Yeah, it's interesting. You could think about the industrial space in particular just as a problem set and how technology is trying to creep in. I think we've all been monitoring the media, and you see what's going on with ChatGPT and AI over the last decade, et cetera. People like to talk about enterprise software, and then you can talk about edge, and you can start to discuss hardware solutions versus being in the cloud. I think AI encapsulates all of that. So whether it's an enterprise software solution or it's embedded in the edge and they're using neural processors or computer vision or whatever, or there's elements of it in the cloud, I think the word is now AI. You don't say software anymore. You don't say hardware anymore. I think everything has to be somewhat intelligent to operate in these dynamic environments, right? And so I think all you need to say is, okay, we need AI. Now, whether it's at the edge or in the cloud, I think depends on the immediacy of the information. So for instance, we deploy an industrial safety solution. Hundreds of milliseconds can matter when a forklift or a crane is approaching a worker and they're looking the wrong way, or someone's too close to a hazardous area and it's an active machine and something bad happens and you need to alert people or shut the process down. So being at the edge is critical. There are other operational aspects where, again, you need real-time monitoring of processes, and being at the edge is critical. You just simply couldn't do it. If you're monitoring, let's say, defects in welds on a production line and you want to shut the line down in case, the process is going wrong. On the other hand, investing at the edge comes with its own burden. Deploying technology in these active industrial facilities is non-trivial. It can be disruptive, and then that's where, like Travis said, you got to get the ops people on board and look for maintenance cycles, and then durability of the equipment, et cetera, is an issue. So there's a lot of times where you really have to ask yourself, do I need to be at the edge, or can I complement some of these things where I grab sensor data and I post-process it up in the cloud? And it's okay if it's within a few seconds or a few minutes and I can generate a report. So you have to look at that. And then the other thing you have to ask yourself, and this is about who consumes the information, is I can produce lots of information, but will anyone consume it? And if so, how would they consume it? So that's starting with the end user in mind, right? I can tell you from my commercial trucking days when we were putting intelligent cameras in trucks, there were some earlier systems that for every time the driver pumped the brake, they were sending an email to a shift manager somewhere. I mean, imagine that for an active fleet. He goes, well, I don't know what to do with this. Yes, I have the data, but I don't know what to do with this. And so, being able to intelligently process what was going on at the edge and contextualize that so that you're only alerting, a shift manager or a dispatch if something critical is happening, get out of the meeting, or prepare for the monthly, staff meeting. Those are two different scenarios, and you need to, direct information in a way that is meaningful for folks like that. So.
Yeah, it reminds me of alarm storms in the process industries, right, Travis?
Absolutely.
People just ignore them, right? You go in a plant and all these alarms are going up. It's pretty frightening.
Yeah, the phone will be going off and they'll be like, hey, is there something important? Nah, it's okay. It's no big deal. Like, because there's so much they don't know what to do, right? There's a problem of not getting enough data. There's a problem of getting too much data. And one thing I wanted to mention that, Sandeep, that you were talking about there is we can create some pretty cool dashboards, and we can predict, breakdowns, machines, and we can forecast processes. The technology is there, like as you were saying. It's though, is there somebody who's going to take that result and have some corrective action? And what does that actually look like, right? How does organization respond? And what's that closed loop piece of it? And you see a lot of the let's put this in place and let's do this, but then we don't we don't think about how we can close the loop or how we can scale that to other processes, other machines, other challenges that are out there. And I know it's a hard thing to think about, but you have to have the people side of it every single time.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
And I just want to comment to the audience, if anybody wants to chime in with any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A there. But Christy, this is a big topic that Sandeep brought up. Is there anything that you wanted to add to, what the guys have said so far?
I think there's two key points here, right? And I think, when we talk about edge IoT, and then there's that cloud element, right? So there's many ways you can solve a problem, right? You can stick to the edge, you can take a look at cloud to edge optimization, how that data flows. And, a lot of the times you've heard a lot of the tech leaders talk about how data is currency, but to what level and to what end, right? And it depends on what academic paper you read. I'll admit there's some disparity out there, but they talk about potentially anywhere between 50 to 70% of the data by 2025. I think they've extended that out. So this paper was written in a couple of years ago, but all that data is going to be processed at the edge versus dumped to the cloud, right? They're just saying that we have so much data out there. What are we doing with it, right? So I think this is the key point that we need to hold. And one thing I really, kind of evade to is I really like how, so if you a little bit of history of Edge and SLB, Edge used to be an actual startup company in SLB, where it was like kind of the early days of what SL was trying to figure out what to do, and the direction we wanted to go in with digital. And actually the founder, who's my boss now, the company used to be called Agora, right? So they started as a startup company. And when he first came up the idea of edge in the context of the oil and gas and energy industry, he thought about, as a field engineer, if everybody remembers when we first got our laptop, why do we get laptops when we join a company, or why do we have laptops to do our work? It makes us more productive, makes us more efficient, helps us make decisions, right? So now with the introduction of all this technology of edge, AI, IoT, et cetera, he said it's the equivalent of giving the well site, the asset, et cetera, a laptop to do their work, right? So it's just going to elevate and escalate that overall, right? And I think it's to align with Sandeep, edge AI, it's almost become synonymous, right? You can have an edge device, but then where does the intelligence come? Like, what do you want that inanimate object to do, right? Do you want it to just connect and transmit data? Then what do you do with that data? How do you turn that data into information, right? What are you going to do now when you do the fast loop side of it, in terms of what's the reaction time, what's the speed, what's the criticality of the action that they need to do? So this is a really great conversation with Travis and Sandeep, because it really validates how the whole organization and the other IoT of organized companies that I talk to a lot. So this is really fantastic.
One other thing, two other things I wanted to mention real quick, and I know we're running out of time, but as it relates to AI, one thing about that we've been finding in covering the edge for all this time. So when the edge first became an issue, it was a lot of virtualization. The software doesn't care about the hardware anymore. But now we find that with AI, and particularly the processors that are required, that the hardware and software combination is relevant. So, it's sort of like hardware is relevant again. And the other thing too that we see, when we talk to customers, they blow our minds with what they envision that they can do with the combination of 5G and AI at the edge. I mean, autonomy is like a major one, but it's just it's a whole nother step change in terms of bringing intelligence to these devices at the edge. So I'm getting the 5-minute warning here, and I don't mean to give it short shrift, but I do want to speak to the issue of security. And if we can each make like a 1 minute, 2 minute statement, I'll stay out of it this time. How do you bring together IT and OT security? Somebody want to speak to that?
Well, I could start with, being a vendor in the OT space, right? and coming in. I've been involved in those conversations where IT is in the room, and typically it's kind of like they start out the meeting very, very pessimistic, like, okay, what is this going to be? What do we have to understand and support and all of that? So I think it's paramount that the products that are being brought in fundamentally have security as part of their, that's just part of who they are and what they're doing, and leveraging the modern practices that are there, so that it's easy for IT to bring it into the organization and support that long term, right? So, for example, like from a visualization, like building an application side, being able to tie into their corporate identity systems that has multi-factor authentication, being able to ensure there's auditing, being able to ensure there's encryption over all the connections, being able to that IT can know what it, how, where it's at, how to manage it, if it can run it in and deploy deploy it in any of their environments, whether it's VMs or containers or edge, servers, whatever it is. So you need to use the products that that are on both ends, that can speak to each other, that leverage open standards, and have those practices as just native part of it. Otherwise, it's very difficult for those organizations to come together.
Sandeep, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things here just based on some battle scars. One, don't underestimate how important this the issue of security is to large industrials.
Right.
Again, you can have a lot of gee whiz technology, especially software, enterprise software, or other devices that you're bringing in. But the word, if you don't know it, and you're trying to go into this space, like SOC 2 compliance, type 1, type 2, these types of things, that if you come from the pure tech world and you haven't tried to inject an enterprise grade solution into an industrial, not having these types of certifications will stop you dead in the water, and it may not be something that you anticipated. And these are lengthy and rigorous processes that you need to go through to certify yourself as an organization, but also your product as you inject it. And again, that whole underestimate thing, like you could have your house in order, but if you have partners, like for instance, we integrate sensors from other partners. We're a sensor agnostic enterprise solution. One of our partners was a wearables partner that was relatively new, and they didn't know how important SOC 2 was, and they got a survey from one of our large steel partners, and they gave it to a junior person to fill out, and they didn't do a good job. And when the IT team at the large steel company got it, they go, okay, shrugged, and send out a note saying that please to drop them and us as a vendor right away. And it took about a month of recovery, but we got everything squared away. But boy, oh boy, it's important. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that transparency, right? Like being able to know what our policies and procedures are and the technologies that are being used.
Christy, can you give me a 1 minute on this?
Yep. At the end of the day, it's about this is the minimum requirement. It's almost a license to operate, to have integrity of your system and domain knowledge in cybersecurity.
Okay, so I'll give you we have a question here I think would be interesting as a sign off. I'll give you a 1-word answer we're looking for. What do you guys think is the percentage of pilots that eventually bring actual sustainable value for the company, for the end customer? Christy, you want to go first?
This is a real stab in the dark because there's so many. This is very loaded. So I am going to refrain from answering because whoever asked the question, I think whoever's asked the question, they can contact me directly. I would love to have this discussion because we do have sustainability solutions within our portfolio, right? And we can dive a little bit deeper into this because sustainability can happen on so many different angles, and I don't think a 1-word answer would be fair to give this topic justice.
How about above 50% or below 50%, guys? Can we work with that?
Yeah, and I think I didn't take the question to be about sustainability. The question was just being able to deliver a solution that operates over the long run. And the way I took the question was, how many pilots succeed?
Yeah.
And I think less than 50%.
Sorry. Okay, I thought it was about sustainability.
Yeah. Okay, Travis, do you have a guess?
Yeah, I mean, definitely less than 50. In my opinion, it does go down even lower. It depends on a lot of factors, but yeah, for a lot of things that we'd already said today. So
I was gonna say, we could just package this all up. All right, so I am out of time. We are out of time, but I want to thank you guys very much for sharing your insights today. I think we gave a lot of value for the amount of time that we had, and I really appreciate that. I also want to thank the audience and Zadata for your time and interest, and certainly Zadata for having us. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break. The next sessions on bridging the IT/OT gap, continuing that conversation, and automating the edge with APIs will begin promptly at 10:45 a.m. PT. You can find the links to these sessions within the agenda or the vFairs platform. Enjoy the rest of the event, and everybody have a great day, and thanks again to our panelists. Take care. Bye-bye.